Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we are talking about frogs, and we're going to start out talking about this tub right here. Guys, we are going to talk everything frog fishing. We're going to talk about the gear, we're going to talk about the baits, we're going to talk about when to throw it, why to throw it, how to throw it. From beginner to expert, we're going to talk about everything. But first I want to talk about this tub, because this tub is why I'm talking to you about this subject. You see all these frogs? All these frogs. This entire tub is my box of retired frogs. Frogs that I have completely destroyed. Beaten the paint off of, bent out hooks, mangled, ripped, torn. This is the box of retired frogs. Frogs that went out there, did their duty, and just finally made it home safe. Finally got put away. Why does this box matter? Look at some of these frogs just destroyed. Paint beat off them, bellies ripped, legs shredded. What else is in here? Why does this box matter? Look at that one. Just mangled. That one had a hard life. Face is blown apart. Paint coming off, hooks destroyed, no legs. The reason this box matters is because what I'm going to talk to you guys about and the baits I'm going to talk to you about isn't random. They're not things that we just picked up yesterday at the tackle shop. These are baits that we throw all the time, that we have confidence in, that we've caught enough fish on to come to you confidently and say, hey, this is what you should try. The problem on YouTube is that you don't know where your information's coming from. You don't know if somebody really knows what they're talking about or if they have as much experience as they say. And that's why I wanted to start with that box, because we're already 2 minutes into this video. But guys, I want you to know that the information that's coming, the baits I'm going to talk about, are proven. Let's start with the baits. We're going to break frogging down into 4 categories. You've got your main frogs, your open water, all around frogs. Heavy cover frogs. Poppin' frogs. And lastly, I don't even know where to put the sprinkler, but a very unique frog that hammers down. It's its own category. 4 categories. Let's get right into it. Why do you need so many different frogs? Well, frankly, you don't. We'll start right here. The main category, that all-around, do-everything frog. And the reason why we're going to start here is because if you make it a couple more minutes and you decide, that's good enough for me, you can check out. But if you want to fine-tune it and really head down this rabbit hole into everything that frog fishing can be, then we'll talk about these other categories. But these right here will do everything. You don't need 20 different frogs. You don't need 20 different colors. You can get by right here. Guys, I'm going to make color super simple for you, okay? Here it is. When you're frogging, my 3 colors, chartreuse, white, black. And I'm talking about the belly color. So, a chartreuse frog, a white frog, and a black frog. If you have those 3 bases covered, you can do anything, anywhere in this country. I don't care where you live. I don't care what color your water is. If your bass eat a frog, or a bird, or bluegill, or bait fish, or anything else that a frog might imitate, those 3 colors will do it. Now, there are a lot of other colors on the market. I mean, I own too many. There's yellows and pinks and reds and browns and blues and all sorts of different things. And they all have a time and a place. But those 3 cover 95% of circumstances. If I was only going to add 1 more after that, it would be a blue frog, because it's unique, it's different. I mean, it's very different. The way it looks, silhouetted to the surface, completely different than all the other colors. And when a lot of guys are throwing frogs, a blue frog can make a big difference. But it's a distant 4th. I mean, I throw it once or twice a year. I throw a chartreuse frog 10 months out of the year. Throw a white frog almost 10 months out of the year, and a black frog probably 6 or 8 months out of the year. Color is simple. Keep it that way. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Very, very simple. Now down in the video description, I'm going to link you all the gear. So don't feel like you have to take a bunch of notes here or try and remember things. I'll link you the frogs. We'll tell you the colors, the rods, everything. Okay? So back to those open water, do everything frogs. 2 frogs in that category that I have the most confidence in. And I've tried a bunch. Tim and I both agree on these. These are the 2 that we throw. First one, River to Sea Bullywah 2. It's our #1 frog. Number 2, Snag-Proof Bobby's Perfect Frog. Those 2 frogs get it done. If I could only have one, it'd be the Bullywah 2, no question. I mean, that is my frog. Such a good frog, straight out of the package. All you do is just trim the legs and you're ready to fish. If you're gonna fish open water, you tip the hooks up just a tiny bit, tip them out just a tiny bit, and you're done. There's no other modifications. It walks, because it has a keeled face, it walks incredibly well. Very, very simple to work the frog. Now, guys, if you don't know how to walk a frog, again, down in the video description, we're gonna link you some other videos that we've done in the past. We'll link you a specific Bullywah 2 video. If you wanna see some giants come in the boat, that's your video. We'll link you how to walk a frog. We did that one a couple years ago. And we'll link you one on the Spit and Wah too, where we stuck a ton of giants, both on Clear Lake and down in the Delta. But don't worry about those details now. They'll be down there, so you can go down there and find that later. Back to these frogs. Because it has that keeled face, it walks really easily. Downside is in vegetation, it has to sit off to one side. So it'll struggle a little bit on mats, like heavy, heavy mats, slop. You'll struggle a little bit with that frog. You do a little bit better with the Snag-Proof. Downside is the Snag-Proof is lighter, so it doesn't sit and push as hard on the mat. This one will push down harder. A little give and take there. But we have specific mat frogs over here. But again, if you just want one frog to do everything, it's one of these 2. Biggest difference, size of fish and your equipment. If you're not going to buy a dedicated frog rod, go with Snag-Proof. You see this hook? It's big, but it's not that big. This hook's way, way, way bigger. So you need a very stout rod for this one. This one, you could get away with like a really heavy worm rod or a heavy jig rod. It'll work. This one, you're talking about getting into dedicated frog gear. So that's kind of the play there. Now, if you want to stop there, you feel free to stop there, but we're about to get into it. Category number 2, frogs built for the mat. We used 2. This one is newer. We didn't get our hands on this frog until the fall. This is, Ish did this frog. It's his, I don't even remember what he calls it, his mat frog or something like that. Again, we'll link it. Matt Daddy, Fat Daddy, I don't know what he calls it. He always has crazy names for his frogs. But that frog, very similar to a Bullywah, but it's flat. See how the keel is gone? Still a monster hook. It's got an awesome hook in it, but they got rid of that keel. This one is perfect on top of the mat because it's gonna sit right all the time. You don't have to worry about it. It's gonna stay right there. You're not gonna tip off to the side and start catching on the vegetation. The other one that I really, really like on the mat is that huge Spro King Daddy. If you're around big fish, that is a killer, killer, killer frog. It's huge. I mean, profile-wise, look at it next to a Snag-Proof Bobby's Perfect. It's massive, right? It's a big, big frog. But it collapses. It's a soft frog. It collapses down to nothing. So it's not hard for him to get it. Plus the hook is way out there in the back end. And I tip that hook up just a touch. See what you end up with when the bait collapses? Those hooks are kind of tipped up. It's a killer hook angle. So it's a really, really good choice despite its size. It has a great hookup ratio. Because it is so large, something we've talked about in previous videos, you can add weight to this frog and really get it to sit heavy on the mat. And really from the bottom side, it's easy for the fish to track it and find it. But both of those are great for that heavy matted vegetation if you want to dial it in. Next, popping frogs. Now we're moving into open water with the poppin' frogs. These are not deep and heavy cover. These are baits that you're gonna wanna fish on edges of tules, over the top of grass, not in that thick, matted stuff. But the two that I've had the most success with, the spit and wah, which again is a very large frog. You'll notice a lot of the frogs we throw are big compared to the industry norm. And that's because when we're frogging, we're trying to get big bites. And that's relative. You know, on this lake, that might be a 7-pounder. On another lake, that might be a 4-pounder. But you're trying to catch a 4 instead of a 2, or a 3 instead of a 1. So we're throwing big frogs, trying to get those big bites. If we wanted to get little bites, it's easier to do with other stuff. So when you're going with the frog, you might as well be trying to get those big ones. So again, that spit and wah, I mean, we've done big things with that. Like I said, we have an actual video dedicated to that. We'll link that down there in the description. And then this one, the jackal, there's a jackal gavacho, I believe is what that one's called. Totally different profile, more slender, different. It's got a round bend hook in it. Almost all these others have a bigger, like EWG almost style hook to them. This one has a true round bend hook, but I've had great success that caught a ton of fish on that frog. I'm very confident in it. And it comes in some unique colors that you don't get from the other brands. And despite it being a popping frog, still walks extremely well. So does the spit and wah. Because that cupped face is catching water, it doesn't want to come forward, it wants to turn. So if you don't overwork it, they walk really easily. But if you miss a blow up, you can stop and pop it, treat it like a true popper, and really convert a lot of those fish. And then last is that sprinker. I mean, what do we even say about the sprinker? Are you guys familiar with this frog? We did a video on this last year. We did a release video like the day it came out. We were very lucky to get our hands on a couple, literally a couple, right before they hit the open market. Just by chance, we got to try them out. We went out right away and caught fish on it. I mean, right away. We had a phenomenal day, and we shot a video about that. We'll put that down there too. Man, there's gonna be a lot of stuff in that description. But seriously, this frog is a lot like the weedless version of a whopper plopper. Throw it out there, just reel it back, and this tail is back there just thumping away, kicking, throwing water, and which is whop, making a ton of commotion. Just throw it on a steady retrieve. The biggest thing that I found that helped me with this frog, two things that you can do. One is if I fished it with my rod a little higher than normal, because when I walk a frog, I walk it right down on the water, and when they eat it, I'm ready to go. With this, I found that if I was running it down low and they ate it, I tended to take it away from them. So if I fish it with my rod a little higher, when they eat it, they almost pull it down, and then I have to react and set the hook. And that little bit of lag time made a huge difference in my hookup ratio. The second thing I did is I started experimenting with taking this round bend hook off of the bait completely and replacing it with a 3/0 EWG hook. So more of that round or wider gap hook instead of a round bend hook, and my hookup ratio really went up. You may want to try that too. But that's it. Those are your 4 categories of frogs. Those open water frogs, cover frogs, poppin' frogs, and whatever you want to call this, a straight retrieve frog. That's what's out there. Now every brand, has got a bait in the category, but they're not all created equal. You want to be careful where you spend your money. That was why this box was important. These are the frogs that we throw constantly and have just mangled fish on. I mean, look at that gavacho. Does that look like it's brand new out of the package? That guy has been chewed on. I love these things. Now, to gear. Ideally, well, this is my main frog rod. I'll tell you exactly what it is. Shimano X-Pride, 7'3", extra heavy. So it's short, but it's a pool cue. The reason why is when you're frogging, you have not 1, but 2 giant hooks that you have to bury. They're huge hooks on their own. When you have 2 of them, when you go to bury that into a fish, you have to drive both points at the same time. They're fighting against each other. That's why that extra heavy rod is so important. Braided line. If you're not frogging on braid, you're pretty much wasting time. Because again, giant hooks, you have to drive both hook points. Other advantages of braid are it's much easier to walk the bait, because walking a frog is ultra finessey. You're barely moving that rod tip. It's not like you would think. It's not like walking a spook. It's barely moving that rod tip. Braid makes a huge difference. At least 50-pound braid. I recommend 65-pound braid. When you're in the heaviest of cover and they eat that frog, that's where that 65-pound braid matters. It's not that a 5-pound fish can break 65-pound braid. It's that a 5-pound fish on the back side of a bunch of sharp, jagged cover can break it. They can cut it. That's why you need that heavy, heavy gear. So a 7.3 extra heavy is my personal rod. But anything between a 7.3 and a 7.6 heavy to extra heavy is ideal. If you're in truly open water, paralleling riprap, something like that, you can get away with that heavy instead of an extra heavy, because you don't have to worry about the cover part of it. But still, you want a stout rod. The only exception is if you're shorter. I experienced this last summer with one of my nephews. He's quite a bit shorter, just under 5 foot. He was having a really hard time hooking up. I had him using one of my rods. He was using a 7.3 extra heavy, and he had a hard time. He'd hit those fish, load them up, and they just come off. So I went home and I grabbed some different rods for him to try for the next day. And the second day, his hookup ratio was amazing. I had dropped him all the way down to a 7-foot heavy. So keep in mind, if you're shorter, going to a slightly shorter rod and a slightly softer rod will make a big difference. But if you do that, be mindful of the frog that you choose. Because if you choose a frog with a huge hook and you go to that shorter, heavy rod, you will not be able to bury those hooks. But if you go to something like that Snag-Proof Bobby's Perfect with that smaller hook in it, you can set that on that heavy rod. You'll be just fine. It will make a big difference, because a lot of times somebody that is shorter, their entire body mass is smaller, so they can't put as much torque on it too. So that heavy rod will load up just a little more than an extra heavy. It'll help keep those fish pinned too. Makes a big, big difference. It did for him. I mean, it made a huge difference. He went from losing 100% of them to landing almost 100% of them. I mean, night and day difference. Now, the last thing I want to touch on, I keep talking about open water frogging, and I want to touch on why we do that, because it never fails. There's going to be somebody that's like, well, why would I throw a frog in open water? That thing's meant for cover. It has a terrible hookup ratio. That's what spooks are for. That's what poppers are for. Well, that's true. That is what spooks and poppers are for. They're for walking in open water, catching topwater fish. However, if you're on a body of water where everybody is throwing that stuff, everybody throws a rover, everybody throws a vixen, if you come in behind them and you throw a silent frog, I mean, you look at these things from the bottom, that whole profile laid out on the surface, it does not look anything like a vixen. It doesn't look anything like a popper. It's completely different. Those fish are used to seeing those baits. They're used to that sound. They're used to that profile. You come in with something different, they come unglued for it. It doesn't matter that you're not in heavy cover. It works. I mean, I've caught frogfish in 80 feet of water, 100 feet of water, out off the ends of points in crystal clear water. Places where you would never throw a frog, simply because everyone else was throwing the same kind of topwater. So we did something different, and it works. And when you follow those modifications that we talk about, where you bend your hooks out, tip them out, add rattles, do those different things, your hookup ratio is so good. When your gear is set up right, it does not matter that it's a frog or a spook. I'm going to catch the exact same number of those fish, and I'm going to get more bites because I'm using a frog and they've never seen it before. So guys, I hope this helps. If you're a beginner, take that basic information and run with it. If you're advanced, or if you want to take your frog fishing to the next level, dig into it, apply it. We are confident in these baits. We are confident in this gear selection. It works. It works every day. We do it almost all year long. There's only a couple months there in the winter where we can't get away with a frog bite where we live. Guys, it works. I hope you have a blast this summer. Get out there, throw a frog, catch some giant bass up shallow, catch a bunch of bass up shallow, and just have a great time. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon.